Welcome to today's edition of the Morning Briefing. I'm Jeff DeForest along with Mike Lubie. Lubitz, very happy to have you guys with us here on NoFilter.net, Caffeine TV, and the variety of other platforms the Morning Briefing appears on, courtesy of this fine outfit here at NoFilter.net. I would imagine if Mike Norvell had no filter, I have this haunting image of the Florida State Seminoles head coach. They keep showing at the reveal that the Florida State Seminoles all gathered together as all these teams do. And you know how it is when they're announcing the teams that are going to the NCAA tournament. They have the shot of everybody together there and the head coach. And as soon as their name pops up, and with the 13th seed, we have Rutgers. And then everybody in the entire state of New Jersey gets up and starts cheering and going crazy. They're going to the big dance. They're going to the tournament. The deflated look on the face of Mike Norvell, Louie, and you, I would imagine, were tuned into this. What was that of a guy that just got completely hosed in a bitter and ugly divorce and had found out that he no longer even owns the shirt on his back. He was going to have to take it off right there in the courtroom and give it to her and watch her walk to the elevator arm in arm, hand in hand with the occasional smooch with her new boyfriend, who also happens to be her high-powered attorney that you couldn't go toe-to-toe with. And never seen a guy look more deflated than Mike Norvell after the announcement was made that they were shut out. And I don't think the sentiment is really simmering anything at all or at this point. If anything, it seems like it's ratcheted up. The absolute despicable move by the committee, the College Football Selection Committee, to deprive a team that had just gone 13-0, won a game in the most desperate of circumstances. Is that not the definition, Lubie, of what team sports is all about? That you don't depend just on one guy, that somehow miraculously, with Rex Chapman making 9 3-pointers, the Miami Heat could beat the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan. Never mind that Michael was in the Bahamas for 2 days, gambling his brains out up until 1 minute before game time when he came hustling in there still in street clothes and had to quickly put his uniform on and go out there and play. But if you remember that game, the Heat had just traded away their entire roster. The new infusion of talent hadn't arrived yet. And with 8 scrubs, they beat the Chicago Bulls. Was that not one of the losses in the Bulls' 72-win season?
Yeah, 7-2-10. One of their 10 losses was that.
One of their 10 losses. I mean, the impossible happens. And when you can dial that up, it's even more dramatic of a story. I mean, this is Rudy getting into a ballgame.
Or the Big Ten. If you're in the SEC or the Big Ten, you can lose games. You cannot win conference championships. You can have backup quarterbacks in and still be prop forward, and the games matter. Only in the SEC and the Big Ten. If you're in another conference, it's pretty clear you don't have a place in the 4-team playoff.
It really is starting to reek of Rudy Giuliani, this selection fraud that was a product after we had heard so much about election fraud, where Rudy's, schwitzing his brains out there. And you could see, what was it, Ron Popeil that put out that can of Krylon that you could spray on your head if you were, some Jewish cat going to a reunion like me, and you were thinking, let me cover that bald spot up there. It's starting to look like I'm wearing a red yarmulke because we get so much sun down here. And that schwitz is dripping with the brown or the black paint. And he's trying to sell you on what is a complete farce. And that's how these people are coming off that are making comments from the committee itself, which I would have thought that they would have just whisked those people back to some country that was non-extraditable so that they would never be heard from again. Yeah. With, they can enjoy their payoff and maybe, have a great lifestyle there, enjoying the company of some young girl in a grass skirt as they were on some Polynesian island, because they should never show up in any capacity involved with sports ever again in the history of any game. And it's kind of disgusting to think that, as you said, unfortunately, now the Orange Bowl has been diminished down to nothing. They may as well bring back Anita Bryant as the flag bearer for the game, because it's been diminished to the point where Georgia has no incentive for any of its star players to go ahead and commit to playing in this ball game. And certainly the Florida State, you're saying they're dropping like flies, that nobody's going to play in this Orange Bowl game for Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, they actually have more talent than people realize because they didn't watch them. And their NFL the guys that are going to go to the NFL and play on Sundays aren't playing. I mean, why Why would they play in this? And Georgia is loaded with NFL guys. Like, why would their guys play in this game? They
Yeah.
again before this game, Georgia was number 1, so they were playing for a championship. That's all they're playing for is championships to play in the Orange Bowl. Again, making a bowl is great, and I think the team should go and experience it. But it's not the playoffs. And if you're undefeated, you should be in the playoffs. And if you were number 1 in your mind, you should be in the playoffs. So this game's stupid. Like it's a lose-lose game for both teams. If FSU wins, well, Georgia didn't give a shit. If FSU loses, see, you didn't deserve it. It's lose-lose. Like I'll watch it, but it's a stupid game. The game's dumb.
May as well be the Pull-On Weed Eater Bowl between Georgia and two excellent teams that both could make the same case that Nick Saban and Alabama and Sankey and all of the SEC powerhouse and power brokers. The same case could be made for these two teams that are going to play in this game, and it turns out to be nothing but drag. All right, did you have any interest in this game last night? This was kind of wild. We talk a lot of degenerate stuff here on the morning briefing, and last night's Cincinnati-Jacksonville game was of huge interest to 24 people who were involved in the Circa Survivor Sweat tournament. 9,200 entries. I guess they anteed up a dime apiece. So the prize, winner take all, is $9.2 million. You're in week 13. Tough to do in a survivor pool. For the unfamiliar, that means that you have to pick one team to win straight up every week in the National Football League. But the catch is, once you use a team, you cannot use them again. And as you get later and later in the season, maybe you've decided not to be like Zach Taylor and get cute and throw an interception with another trick gadget play after the first one had backfired and cost you 7 yards earlier in the ballgame in a big spot. You go ahead and have a guy throw a pass straight to a defensive player's hands. I mean, as if he had picked him out of the crowd and said, here, you grab the ball, go in for a touchdown. He didn't go in for a touchdown, but Jacksonville eventually did. And that sparked and ignited an emotional outburst for the 24 people that had Jacksonville last night in the Circa Survivor Sweat Pool, $9.2 million at stake for the $1,000 buy-in. You're in week 13, Lubie, and you have to watch Jake Browning, a backup quarterback, continue to shine as if he was Peyton Manning coming back in his prime, and drive the Cincinnati Bengals down the field time after time after they'd done everything in their power to lose this ball game, and come back and eventually win in overtime, leaving like a handful of people left in this survivor pool. But imagine having your fortunes riding on that. And just when you think you have the game in the bag, Trevor Lawrence goes down, which now has once again, I mean, I don't know how seriously he was injured. The report from the sidelines, is this credible or not? It wasn't Carissa Thompson down there, was it? Because she might have just implied that Lawrence was going to come back. Supposedly, he was questionable to return to the ballgame, which didn't sound all that serious, did it? When he was being carted off the field, you would have thought...
Bad, it's just a sprained ankle, so he'll be fine. Maybe he misses a game. Like it's a sprained ankle, so he'll be okay.
Yeah, you would have thought he was a candidate for amputation, the way that the announcers were describing this, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. No, that's it. His season's over. And they had to bring in a backup quarterback, Beathard, right? Isn't he like the grandson of Bobby Beathard, the great Bobby Beathard?
Bobby Beathard, yeah.
Cousin, nephew, something? I think he might be the grandson.
I think he's a grandson.
Anyway, I don't think he's been in a game in like 4 years, this guy. He had been out longer than Joe Flacco, who was back on the practice squad. So he has to rally the Jaguars. Your fortune is at stake. You're shot at $9.2 million. And you've got this backup schmeck who hasn't played in 4 years, regardless of the historic value that is contained in his name, after Bobby Beathard was hailed as one of the great executives in the history of the National Football League, going way back. And he actually rallies them into a position where it goes into overtime, and then your fate is decided by the cruelest of things, and that is the still impossible to figure out how this is fair NFL overtime parameters, where if you get the ball first and score a touchdown, you win the game. The other team never gets the ball. I thought they were going to fix that, Lubie. Do we have to offer up our formula for fixing that once again? Why hasn't this ever been taken into consideration? Because it makes too much sense, Lubie. And that is, when you go to overtime in the NFL, you just resume the game where it was.
Your rule, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
What is wrong with that? It's a continuation of the game. You're going into overtime. Why do you have to start from scratch in overtime?
Yeah.
If you're if you're, in an NBA game or an NHL game, you go to overtime. Okay, so you drop the puck. But it doesn't necessarily, that's an arbitrary way of deciding which team gets the ball. A coin flip is too arbitrary in that point, where it's so significant, the difference, because Jacksonville nearly does go down and get a touchdown. Were it not for a holding call, they would have been at like the 4-yard line,
Yeah, yeah.
and all of those guys would have stayed alive in the circuit tournament.
Yep.
Instead, they get crushed like a grape as a holding call eventually and a sack takes Jacksonville out of field goal range. They have to punt the ball away, and this Browning, again, looks like Johnny Unitas, and he rallies Cincinnati in a very improbable victory. You had to be pretty comfortable if you had Jacksonville last night, no? The spread on the ball game went off 10 points in their favor, and they were playing some really good football, and now that leaves the Dolphins as the number 1 seed. So a lot was riding on that ball game last night, but most of it was the $9.2 million in the Survivor Sweat tournament. Used to be suicide pools. That's a very unpopular term now.
Oh, yeah.
But can be. It shows how difficult it is because you had 9,200 entrants. There were only 80 left going into this week, and 48 went down between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars last night. You think my friend will ever speak to me again? Because as soon as he texted me that he had Jacksonville, I knew they were doomed. I wasn't ever uncomfortable. I went ahead, took the points and the money line with the Cincinnati Bengals, so that was great. I don't know when will this story doesn't go away, does it? This is a blot on the college football and college sports that I think it's left an indelible impression. I mean, it's never going away, isn't it? Is that the right word? Indelible? Yeah.
Indelible imprint. Yeah. That's
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I started thinking, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Indelible, Defo? You're going way off track here. Yeah, I mean, how can anybody ever look at? I'm with you, Lubie, on this. You couldn't possibly look at the game the same way ever again after this decision. That's how brutal it was. You're saying people are flipping on this, that people that were defending it because they work for various networks?
There's only one, but all of them went the other way. A bunch of people were already saying this, and then a few were actually defending FSU, and then suddenly Sunday they changed. Mike Greenberg's the only one that was the other way all weekend, and then when it actually happened, it woke him up, and he lost his mind yesterday.
But we know this, that every year they try to manufacture a way for Nick to win the championship. Every single year, always getting favorable considerations when it comes to rankings and ratings and whether or not they're in or out of the tournament. I mean, even after they lost to Texas, you were thinking, and even as they were on the ropes against virtually every other team they played in the ensuing weeks, even as they were completely uncertain about who their quarterback was going to be, to their credit, they had a guy that actually got better during the course of the season, and Jalen Milroe. Does that eliminate in the minds of the committee the possibility that with Rodemaker coming back, a guy who had shown signs that he was a very capable quarterback, that does that eliminate the chance that he can have a better ball game than he did against the University of Florida when he was shaking off a lot of ring rust?
He literally hadn't played all year and had less than a week to prepare.
Yeah.
He could have a fucking month to prepare. Like
exactly.
Be better. Like
it's so ridiculous.
Logic. They just want the SEC in. I mean, if you listen to what they're saying, it's like when Saban and Kirby Smart were talking about their mythical losses ahead of time. It's hamina hamina. It's not based on logic or reasoning. It's based on. I don't want to be. It's like politicians. I won't say either side. It's like politicians. They use very generic terms that you can't define, you can't prove, but you can't disprove. They're not using logic. Like they now are trying to use strength of schedule. Yeah, but you're not using strength of record. You're not using victories over bowl teams. You're not using totality of the season because Bama with a backup almost lost to USF. Texas with a backup almost lost to Houston. FSU beat a better Florida team and a better Louisville team than both of those teams by bigger margins. They won by like a field goal or less versus those two teams with their backups. So what does it show? Having a backup in is hard to win. So
no doubt, yeah.
With a backup or a third string, it's more impressive.
That's what I feel. I mean, to win that game that they did over Louisville, that was the thing that really fucked up the entire committee's grand plan to get Nick into the championship. And if they let Nick in with Alabama, they had to put Texas in.
But why?
So that set up the hose job.
You worry about head to head over undefeated. If you're going to fuck undefeated, why can't you fuck head to head?
Yeah.
I think the whole thing's ridiculous. They didn't have to put Texas in. They didn't have to do any of it. They didn't do the best. They didn't do the most deserving. They definitely didn't do who earned it. They did where the money was. I mean, we saw it. We saw it.
You have to dig up that clip from The Godfather where Michael Corleone, Pacino comes in and he tells Robert Duvall, as Tom, "You're out, Tom. We're moving the operation to Las Vegas. You're out, Tom." And he goes, "Why am I out?" He goes, "You're out." That's it.
For no reason. Yeah. And just leave it at that. Stop making
Yeah, this was mob rule to its highest example. All right, we have to run. Thanks so much for being with us. Sorry, I don't know. We're not really crying about this. It is a disgrace. You hate to see this level of injustice done and competition ruled meaningless by a committee that's supposed to be judging, the level of competition that you played and all of this other stuff. And instead, they just throw all of that out the window and say, well, because you don't have one guy in your lineup, we can justify a complete fucking, the likes of which you haven't seen since Debbie Does Dallas. I mean, it's just absolutely insane that this has transpired, and it tarnishes all of it, including the eventual national champion, whoever lands in that spot.
And the playoffs are paper. Like, this isn't, any publicity is good publicity, which a lot of people were talking about, where they were trying to get this in and also piss people off because they wanted someone to talk about. No, you don't get it. This is the opposite. Like, this invalidates your sport.
Yeah.
Like, people like me aren't going to watch the playoffs. Like, it's not because my team's not in it. The playoffs don't matter. Like, I don't watch figure skating. When judges can pick, that woman's was way better than that other woman, but I'm French, so I have to vote for the Russian over the American. Okay. So it's not a real sport. And that's what college football is to me now. Like, it's not a real sport. It's just bullshit.
That's why they're always crying there. It doesn't matter what's going on. How about the French judge that time in the Salt Lake City games? How crooked were those games overall? From Juan Antonio Samaranch walking away with a Rolls Royce. And he really did. He had like a grandfather clock, like a Flavor Flav around his neck. Some rare antique they had just bestowed upon him for granting Salt Lake City the rights to the games. And then they had the French judge was at that same Olympics, I think, where, she gave some American girl like a 3.6, even though she had just nailed a routine that would have made Peggy Fleming blush. Unbelievable. Yeah. All right, we have to run. And never mind the Peggy Fleming references. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, you guys have a great day, everybody. We're not crying about it. No more crying. It's just it so defies logic. I guess it goes in conjunction with everything that's going on in the world today.
Yeah.
As logic has been thrown out the window. We'll see you next time on the next edition of the Morning Briefing here on NoFilter.net.